Well, hi there again. It's been a little while. It's been over Christmas and a few things have been going on. So, I haven't got back to this. But now's the time. So, this is maybe part 4, I think. I've got Socrates, Plato, Descartes, Hume. So that'd be part 5 of a series on philosophy. And it's particularly dealing with, looking at what these things have meant to me and what the writings of these people have meant for me. Again, it's not a lecture series. It's just a reflection of mine. And I'd like to say that I'm not putting this out as being the answer or the right interpretation or something. I'm just saying this is how it's how I've taken these things and what they've done for my thinking. And if people watching this have ideas and thoughts, I'm not a like, comment, subscribe sort of guy. I ignore the algorithm basically, and I'm not interested in just getting clicks or something. But if someone watches this and they have thoughts about these topics themselves, it'd be great if you just mention something, and I'd be interested. I'm thinking my way through this stuff again, actually, after all this time of thinking about a lot of other things as well as philosophy. But I really do find it very interesting to engage on these topics. And I did mention that I'm calling him Bill ChatGPT. Bill's easier. Is an interesting tool to reflect on this stuff, but it's not the same as engaging with real people. So, as I said, if anyone is watching this and you've got thoughts on these things, please let me know. So, this one is about Kant, Immanuel Kant. And actually, I was just starting I turned up at the uni and knocked on the door of one of the lecturers. I'd just been to the uni bookshop, and I just asked if I could sit in on some lectures because I didn't want to enrol. Had a bit of a thing about formal education. I didn't want to go near it again. But I'd just been to the uni bookshop and I'd bought a book on Kant, which should be up there. And the guy was slightly surprised. There it is. Hang on. Yeah, I just bought this Cambridge Companion to Kant from the uni bookshop. And he was a little surprised that was what I was into. But that said, a friend of mine was talking with his son the other day, and his son said, I've started looking into Kant. So it does happen. People get interested in things. And now I would say that I don't know the journey that my mate's son has had to getting to looking into Kant. I'd be interested to have a chat with him, actually. But I don't know how he's got there, but it took me a long time to get to Kant. Socrates is much more approachable, in the dialogues through Plato, and Plato. So I think to understand or have a chance of understanding, assuming that I do understand Kant, you've got to get the story, got to understand what he's reacting to. And so we had a Descartes over here on the rationalist, that is, people who believe that there's knowledge before experience. And we've got Descartes over here. We've got Hume, and of course there was Locke and Berkeley as well, were famous empiricists. But Locke and Berkeley I did find interesting. Berkeley, I'll come back and do one of him because he's fascinating. But it was Hume that really impacted my thinking. So what we got Descartes, who sets up the idea that we need is cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, that we have knowledge that we can have before experience, and he justifies this through doubting all sorts of things, down to the point of starting off with, how do I know I'm not making a mistake on this mathematical problem, down to there's an evil demon there may be an evil demon who's trying to deceive us. But then he says, well, I know I exist. And then he tries to come back out of that position. But I think that that him assuming that there has to be a God and that God is good is not a convincing way to get back out of that supposed doubt. But he was convinced, and a lot of others around him, and there was a lot of, he kicked off a lot of thought, a lot of mathematics and geometry and anatomy, medicine, so I think that was a very worthwhile thing. But then Hume comes back and says, well, I'm not so sure about all of that. We only know what we know through our senses, and pushes back against Descartes. And I think he's very convincing. And so the rationalists at this point seem to be struggling a bit. But Kant, so over here, I'm going to put Kant over here. And for the more observative, of the people, I rubbed out my absolute scribble over here and actually wrote something that was at least vaguely legible for a posteriori. So, I think that, Kant acknowledges the strength of the criticisms against Descartes' foundation. And he says, well, okay, I acknowledge that's the case. But he said, look, there's a world that exists independent of our experience. And at this point, internalism was kind of the dominant view. I'm going to assume it's probably not only the dominant view, probably the only view. I think externalism came quite a bit later. But internalism says, well, we're trapped inside of our body and we can only experience the world through our senses. And our senses may not be reliable, so we can't actually get out into the world. And so Kant acknowledges this, and he said that there is a world that exists out there, independent of our experience. And he calls it the noumenon. And we can't know the noumenon. We can't directly touch that world. But he says we're all human and we all share biology. We all share neurology and physiology. So the world will always appear to us in certain ways. And these are reliable. So even though we don't know the world as it actually is, we know the world as it appears to us as humans, and that he called the phenomenon. And the phenomenon is determined by who we are as a species and our neurology and physiology. So we have to, he said it was explained to me in lectures that rather than a foundation like Descartes went for, where he said there's something we just can't doubt, they described Kant more as we are a satellite, and the satellite might be moving around in space, but it's tied to itself, and that satellite it has a relationship to itself that doesn't vary. So rather than it being a foundation, it's got this sort of internal coherence or structure. And so he said that we can, it kind of went back to saying there are things we can know before we experience them because we're human. And by that alone, we are able to predict. And he put forward these categorical imperatives. Some of them, there's also, he did a lot in ethics. But he put forward these ideas that he said are going to be true for all people. And there are things like there's 3 dimensions, and we experience the world in 3 dimensions, X, Y, and Z, and so forth. Up, across, and depth. So, of course, you put forward any sort of statements like that into the community of philosophers, and they're going to have a good hard go at figuring out an exception. If you say it must be and will always necessarily be true, and therefore is reliable, then people are going to challenge that. And I don't know, the latest idea in physics, I think there are 11 or 12 dimensions or something or another. But there was pushback, and there was exceptions found to these ideas. But again, I think this idea, it's nice to think, it's very comforting to think that we can know things before they happen. We can plan and we can predict, and I think that I see Kant as responding to Hume, and in Hume's skepticism, and then kind of a pragmatism, and just sort of saying, well, but even though we can't know, we have to act as if we do. Kant is pushing back and saying, well, maybe we don't know what it's really like, but we know how it appeared to us. Now, I did find a couple of things about Kant's ethics very interesting too. Kant basically said that morally good actions can only be done out of duty. So if you have any sense of satisfaction or pleasure that you gain from what would be a moral act, it's no longer moral. You've done it out of self-interest. So the only things that are morally good that you do give you zero pleasure, and you do entirely out of duty. And I don't find that a particularly convincing argument. I don't know. I mean, I don't have a strong, robust sort of systematic answer to that. But it always rang, surely one of the, I don't know. If you are entering into relationships with people in a meaningful and appropriate way, hopefully it should be symbiotic. There should be good, ethically good things coming from both, for both parties. And if you have to go out and actually find someone that you loathe or don't know in any way and perform some dutiful act that you get no pleasure from to be morally good, then there's not very morally good people out there. So I've never found that a particularly persuasive position. There's another aspect of Kant's ethics that I find very interesting, and I think has a lot to offer, and that is that he said people should never be used as a means to an end. They should always be an end in themselves. And I look at a lot of what's going on currently, say within workplaces. We used to have personnel departments because they dealt with people. Now we have human resource departments, and what this means is that along with other resources, you need energy resources and you need various materials and so forth, you need human resources. And this seems to demote humans to being some sort of necessary machine. And if you're dealing with human resources, you don't have to... what you want to do is get them for the cheapest possible price and the minimum fuss. And this is something that I find interesting in... I can offend the left and the right, and I do. But I think that there's a lot of argument that our societies, it's all about growth and economics, and we need to pursue this necessarily. But if ultimately, what's the point of all of this? I thought that some sort of quality of life was, and some sort of sense of self and worth is what it would all be about. But one of the jobs of human resources is to consume. And so we have to be persuaded to consume things that we don't need and may be bad for us and certainly not good for the planet. And so we're used as a commodity to buy commodities. And it's all about generating wealth. But that wealth is not being necessarily spread well. So I think that if we took seriously Kant's idea that people should always be treated as an end in themselves, a lot of these things that I find troubling and the way that things are done would not be done. You look at so many of the problems that we see around us in our society, and if people were treated as an end in themselves rather than a means to an end all the time and in every instance, I still think that we could have meaningful economies and trade and a lot of these things. But I think that they would look potentially fairly different to what they look now. So I mean, Kant for me, I don't know. I didn't, apart from those aspects of his that aspect of his of his ethics. I found it interesting, this idea of the noumenon, but I never found it terribly useful. It didn't. I saw it as an interesting response to Hume, and another attempt. I guess, in a lot of ways, I find I'm inclined toward the empiricists. Yeah, I found Kant more an interesting person to try to understand, but for that reason, because I haven't resonated, I haven't dwelt on Kant in the same way, and also I found his writings impenetrable. Some of the hardest things I've ever read were trying to read Kant. Really long paragraphs and 15 punctuation marks in there. Got 7 colons and a semicolon and commas and whatever. And at the time I was trying to read him, I say trying to read him because it was just an effort. I was running a big CNC machine, computer-driven lathe, and it was the only way I could get through it because I'd read a little bit and I'd go to the lathe and have to do something just to check it, and then come back and read again. And it meant I woke up every time. But I'd find myself, I'd read this long paragraph, and then by the end you're going, now which bit of that paragraph is attached? And it was this puzzle. There's a statement here and down, then all these clarifications, then another statement, and hang on, this statement goes back to that statement, but then this one links to that one, and that one refers to what's coming next. And I just, oh man. So I really learned most of what I learned from commentaries and from talking with other philosophers, because I just found his writing so difficult. And I don't know whether it's better in the German, but the translations, oh my gosh. So that was my experience with Kant, and we'll call it there on this one.